Grand Rising. This is the Verbal Tunnel, and this is Democracy Now! This is extracted from Democracy Now! The legendary reporter, Amy Goodman, is Israel the Cabal? Now the man-made famine is allegedly imminent. Israel is mad at UNRWA and want to block any assistance, humanitarian aid from UNRWA. All right. Okay. We'll let her talk. Without further ado, take one and see what Israel got going on with the humanitarian corporation we call UNRWA. Here we go.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Norwich.
Despite a UN-backed report that found famine is imminent in northern Gaza, Israeli authorities informed the United Nations on Sunday that it will no longer approve the passage of any UNRWA food convoys into northern Gaza. This is Israeli spokesperson David Mentz speaking to reporters on Monday.
UNRWA are part of the problem, and we will now stop working with them. We are actively phasing out the use of UNRWA because they perpetuate the conflict rather than try and alleviate the conflict.
In response to the news, UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini wrote in a social media post, quote, "This is outrageous and makes it intentional to obstruct life-saving assistance during a man-made famine. These restrictions must be lifted." UNRWA is the largest organization with the highest reach to displaced communities in Gaza. By preventing UNRWA to fulfill its mandate in Gaza, the clock will tick faster towards famine, and many more will die of hunger, dehydration, and lack of shelter, he wrote.
The decision came as President Biden signed a $1.2 trillion appropriations bill that strips funding to UNRWA for the next year. The U.S. first suspended aid to UNRWA in late January when the Israeli government leveled allegations that 12 of the agency's 30,000 employees were involved in the Hamas attacks of October 7th. The unsubstantiated allegation prompted other top donors such as Germany, the European Union, and Sweden to cut funding to UNRWA.
Y'all know that's crazy.
Although a number of countries have recently announced their intention to resume funding.
These people are paranoid, you know?
Jordan, where we're joined by
30,000 people.
She's spokesperson
for Hamas,
the UN Palestinian Agency, UNRWA. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Tamara. If you can start by talking about the significance of what the U.S. has done. President Biden signed off on a bipartisan law that dealt with a lot of issues, but among them, cutting off aid to UNRWA for the next year. And the U.S. is by far the largest funder of this UN Palestinian Relief Agency.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks as always for giving UNRWA this platform. The decision by Congress and consequently by the U.S. government to stop funding to UNRWA this year is a huge blow. There is no sugarcoating. The impact on our finances is huge. And also the impact on the politics around UNRWA, seeing our largest donor and many times our closest partner withhold funding, which means withhold trust to UNRWA, is a huge blow to us. However, I also want to say that in parallel, several governments, European and non-European, have either much increased their funding to UNRWA or have given us money for the first time. Also, we're getting overwhelming individual support donations from $10 to $20,000 to our campaigns and our drives. And that speaks for a sentiment that is also galvanizing around UNRWA, around its role, and mostly around the fact that it is not possible to just decide to pull the plug on a UN agency. Any change to the way a UN agency works, especially as UNRWA gets its mandate from the UN General Assembly, should be discussed in the General Assembly. It is not about one or two UN member states to decide whether UNRWA can continue working or not. This is a global decision at the General Assembly is where we get an overwhelming vote of support. And that is where such a conversation should take place.
Mara, could you talk about the countries that had previously rescinded funding to UNRWA and may now have either resumed it or intend to resume it?
Yes, I can talk about a few countries that just over the last few days made their contributions to UNRWA. Germany, for example, which by the way had not really suspended its funding. It just took a little bit of a pause to think. And Germany just announced $45 million in income to UNRWA just in the last few days. The same, Canada, Australia, Sweden, and a number of other countries that had initially withheld their funding to UNRWA following these allegations, around 12 of 13,000 staff members in Gaza, now are releasing their funding. But I also want to talk about the role of Ireland or Spain, both of them having much increased their funding to UNRWA and also their political support. The European Union, our second largest donor as a group, did release the large part of its funding to UNRWA, and also countries like Qatar, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and just today Kuwait. All of them are supporting UNRWA, and again, income from private sources, from individuals and foundations, has skyrocketed since the beginning of this year, especially now during Ramadan, where many Muslims around the world are looking for a zakat-friendly way, so a way to donate as per Islamic Sharia law. We have this mechanism, and many Muslims from around the world, from Malaysia to Indonesia to Singapore, are donating to UNRWA.
Canada as well, hasn't it said it's restoring UNRWA aid?
Sweden, you said? I couldn't hear you.
Canada?
Oh yes, Canada did restore its funding, yes.
So if you could say, also speak, Tamara, about the fact that Israel has now said it will no longer approve any UNRWA food convoys to the north. What are the implications of that?
The implications are huge. In the last few days alone, we received 5 denials to our requests to move food from the south of the Gaza Strip and Rafah to the north. Now, so we consider this to be a ban on UNRWA's food distribution in the north. The Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, was also denied access to Gaza 2 weeks ago, despite having followed the usual procedures to ask for him and his delegation to go into Gaza. What we're truly seeing here is the space around UNRWA in Gaza is really shrinking, and our ability to adequately continue saving lives is really being obstructed. We're talking here about food distribution to an entire population that is food insecure. Food